The rain is falling outside, and the room is warm again. Before we begin, what kind of stories would you love to hear more of? Leave me a comment. I love choosing tales that bring you comfort. And if you'd like to return tomorrow, just tap subscribe and leave a like. Now, let's drift into tonight's story. It started as habit, nothing more. Same bus, same time, same direction. I took the 7:40 5 days a week from the stop on the corner of Mercer and 3rd. The bus was never completely full, but never truly empty either. That strange in-between you only get on early morning routes. Everyone just far enough apart to pretend they didn't notice each other. I always sat in the 3rd row, left side, by the window. Not for any special reason at first. It was close enough to the front that you didn't get jostled when people rushed on, but far enough back that no one expected conversation. The seat had a slight rip along the edge, the kind someone had tried to patch with tape. Over time, that rip became familiar to my hand, a quiet landmark beneath my fingertips. There was something about watching the world pass from that window that made the morning softer. The bakery on 12th, the man who swept in front of the florist shop, the kid with the oversized backpack who always sprinted across the same crosswalk with one shoelace undone, all of it became part of my rhythm. I didn't listen to music, didn't scroll, just watched. Let the city rise in its usual blur, coffee in hand, head tilted slightly against the glass. I never tried to memorize the people around me, but patterns have a way of stitching themselves into your mind whether you ask for it or not. There was the older woman with the long gray braid who always read folded newspapers in French. The college kid who wore headphones even when they weren't plugged into anything. The man in the brown coat who always got off at 17th without looking back. Some mornings, I'd wonder where they were going. Not out of curiosity, just quiet empathy. As if knowing they were moving through the same stretch of time made the day feel less isolated. The bus made 23 stops between my place and the office. I knew them all by the way the road shifted beneath the tires, knew when the light would hit the side of the window just right and paint my lap in warmth for 12 perfect seconds. I knew the exact bend where the driver would slow, even if the street was clear. That kind of knowing becomes a comfort when everything else in life feels unpredictable. One morning, I arrived at the stop to find someone already waiting. She stood just to the side of the bench, not leaning, not checking her phone, just still, maybe 30. Quiet coat, canvas bag, dark eyes. When the bus came, we both stepped on, and I moved to my seat 3rd row, left side, half expecting she might choose something near the back. She didn't. She sat across the aisle from me. Not beside, not far, just close enough to be felt. That day, I glanced over once. She didn't notice, or pretended not to. But something about the way she sat upright, but not tense, stayed with me. When she got off 4 stops before me, I watched her reflection in the window rather than turn my head. And I thought, maybe she's not new. Maybe I just never looked before. That night I couldn't say why, but I found myself thinking about that moment, her quiet across from mine. And for the first time in months, I looked forward to the next morning. Not because anything would change, but because maybe it wouldn't. She was there again the next morning, Same coat, same canvas bag, same stillness. This time, she stood closer to the signpost, and when the bus pulled in, we both stepped on, as if part of the same practiced motion. She didn't look at me, not directly, but we both knew where we were going. I took my seat, third row, left side, and she again sat across the aisle. Same position, same distance, no smile, no nod, just presence. I didn't try to make anything of it. Not a moment, not a connection, just a continuation. And somehow, that was enough to make the morning feel steadier than usual. She sat upright, hands folded on her lap, one thumb slowly brushing the edge of her bag in a repetitive motion. Her eyes didn't wander. She didn't pull out a book. She just sat and looked forward like someone who understood the importance of letting a day begin without needing to explain it. I watched her reflection again, the way the light shifted over her face as we passed under trees and overpasses. She didn't flinch when the brakes squeaked, didn't react to the teenager laughing too loudly in the back. It was like she had made peace with the space, or maybe brought the peace with her. Either way, I found myself breathing easier. I didn't know her name. I didn't know where she got on or why. But suddenly, my seat, that quiet, familiar corner of the bus, felt shared, even if only silently. When she stood to leave at the same stop as the day before, she paused just briefly, holding the metal pole for balance. I half expected her to glance back, but she didn't. She just stepped off and disappeared into the same crowd of pedestrians and storefront shadows. That evening, I thought of her again, not obsessively, not romantically, just with curiosity. The kind you feel when someone becomes part of your scenery, and you realize they were always meant to be there, even if you didn't know it. The next morning, I arrived a few minutes early. The stop was empty. I stood in the usual spot, coffee in hand, and waited. She didn't come, at least not right away, and something in me felt unexpectedly restless. I watched each person approach the stop, hoping, noticing. Then, just as the bus lights rounded the corner, I saw her crossing the street calm, steady, without rush. She stepped up beside me, not looking over, not acknowledging the small distance between us. But we both knew this was no longer coincidence. It was rhythm, routine, a mutual arrival. We boarded. I sat. She sat. Same seats, same silence, same shared moment. And in that quiet, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Accompaniment. Not company. Not conversation. Just the subtle warmth of not being the only one trying to hold a soft space in a hard world. That was enough. That was everything. The third week, she brought a book. Just once. She stepped on the bus the same as always, coat buttoned, canvas bag resting against her side. But that morning, the top of the bag wasn't closed. A corner of a paperback stuck out, yellowed slightly, worn. I noticed it without meaning to. It was the first new thing in our silent rhythm. She sat across the aisle, her seat now a part of the morning. I counted on like the sound of the doors folding shut or the soft hiss of the brakes at 12th Street. Only this time, when she settled in, she pulled the book out gently and opened to a page already waiting. The cover, creased in the bottom corner, read, Letters to a Young Poet. Rilke, I recognized it instantly. The kind of book people carry when they're trying to steady something inside, not broken, just unsettled. She didn't look up. She read quietly, carefully, no underlining, no scribbles in the margin, just her eyes moving across the page like someone walking a familiar road, not rushing, not lost. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help noticing how she held the book fingers cradling the spine like it was fragile, like it had held her before, and she was now returning the favor. Outside, the city passed in its usual rhythm. Storefronts, parked cars, early morning cyclists. But I wasn't watching the window that day. I was watching her, or rather, the version of her that I'd only now begun to piece together, someone who didn't just sit in stillness, but chose it, someone who sought out words the way others seek noise, for grounding. The bus jolted once, and she adjusted slightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear before returning to the page. And in that moment, I felt something strange. Admiration. Not for her as a person, I didn't know her, but for her ability to make space for herself inside the world. Quiet space. No walls, just presence. At her usual stop, she slipped a folded receipt between the pages as a marker, closed the book slowly, and returned it to her bag. Then she stood and exited, as always, no rush, no look back. But that book, it lingered. That evening, I found my own copy of Letters to a Young Poet on a shelf I hadn't touched in years. Dusty, pages curled slightly at the edges. I opened it to the first letter, and there it was, the sentence I hadn't read in a decade. Have patience with everything that remains unsolved in your heart. I closed the book and held it in my lap. The room was quiet. Outside, a bus passed by in the dark, and I thought of her. Thought of how sometimes the smallest change, a book pulled from a bag, can feel like an offering, not to impress, not to share, just to say, I'm carrying something too. And maybe we're not so different after all. It was a rainy Wednesday, the kind of morning where everything feels heavier, even the light. The streets were slick. Umbrellas jostled at every corner, and the bus arrived 2 minutes late, which somehow felt like 20. I stepped on, as always, water sliding from my coat, coffee in one hand, and made my way to the third row, left side. My seat, my window, my rhythm. She was already on board, but something was off. She wasn't sitting across from me. Her usual seat was taken. A man, maybe in his 40s, dressed in a loud orange jacket, headphones over both ears, had slouched across the row, his knees spread wider than necessary, backpack on the floor, unaware or uninterested in what space he occupied. She had taken a seat 2 rows behind me by the opposite window, quiet, still, but distant. I felt the shift immediately. Not panic, not anger, just displacement. Like a favorite line in a song suddenly played out of order. The morning felt looser, less held. I sat, glanced out the window, tried to pretend it didn't matter, that it was just a seat, that she was still on the bus, still reading. I could see the book in her lap, but it wasn't the same. Her presence, once close enough to feel without looking, was now diluted by space. I turned my head just slightly, not enough to be obvious, and saw her focused on the page, calm, composed, as if nothing had changed. But for me, something had. The orange-jacket man leaned his head back, oblivious, chewing gum loudly. I looked at the seat across from me, her seat, and felt an emptiness I hadn't expected. I realized then how much I had come to count on her being there. Not for conversation, not for attention, just for the balance she gave to the space. Her stillness had become part of my stillness. Her silence, part of the air I breathed each morning. And now, without it, the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt interrupted. When she stood to leave, she didn't look toward her usual spot, just moved through the crowd gently, folded her umbrella, and disappeared into the blur of morning traffic. That evening, I couldn't focus. The image of her reading from 2 rows away, so close and yet unreachable, kept surfacing, and it made me wonder if something small like distance could affect me this much. What was I really doing on that bus every day? Was I just chasing a moment of peace? Or had that moment grown into something more? Something I hadn't named because it was too quiet to announce itself? I didn't know, but I knew this. I would be early tomorrow, not to save a seat, not to interfere, just to be there, to keep that space open. Because some routines aren't just habits. They're agreements, unspoken, unwritten, but real. And when the quiet is that carefully built, you do what you can to protect it. I arrived earlier than usual. Not by much, maybe 4 minutes, but enough to feel like I was claiming something without demanding it. The rain had stopped, leaving the sidewalks damp and reflective, and the sky was that soft, forgettable shade of morning gray that carries no weight, but somehow holds everything. The bench at the stop was slick, so I stood, coffee warming my palms, eyes on the street's slow rhythm. She came around the corner just as the bus was cresting the hill steady steps. No umbrella this time, just her coat and the canvas bag tucked against her hip. She didn't look up, neither did I, but we both knew we boarded together. I stepped ahead, took my seat, 3rd row, left side. The air inside the bus was warmer than outside, still waiting. She paused in the aisle, just briefly. Her usual seat, the one across from me, was empty. She stood there for a breath longer than usual. Then, without looking over, she sat in the old seat. Her seat, ours, in a way. I didn't react, not outwardly, but inside, something softened. Like a string that had been pulled tight was finally allowed to loosen. She opened her book, a different one today, the cover plain, no title visible, and began to read. I watched the window, but not really. I was aware of every small sound, the turn of her page, the sigh of the bus's engine, the scrape of a shoe across the aisle. She didn't speak, I didn't either, but the space between us felt full again. Not crowded, not expected, just settled. At the light near 12th, the bus paused longer than usual. No one got on, no one moved. She looked up from her book, briefly, and for the first time since this rhythm began, our eyes met. Not a stare, not a signal, just a shared second. A yes, I'm here too. Then she returned to her page, and I to my quiet. She got off at her usual stop. No pause, no glance back. But when she stood, she left the book on her seat. I blinked, unsure if it was deliberate, and waited. The bus pulled away. She didn't return. No one moved to take the book. I reached across the aisle and gently picked it up. The spine was worn. Inside the front cover, in small handwriting, "For the mornings that remind us we are not invisible." No name, no date, nothing else. I held the book in my lap for the rest of the ride. Didn't open it, didn't read, just let it rest there, warm from her hands. That evening, I placed it on my shelf beside Rilke and thought, maybe this was her way of saying it, whatever it was. And maybe I didn't need to define it. Maybe presence was enough. Maybe being seen without being asked to perform or explain was the quietest kind of care. And maybe, just maybe, we had both needed that more than we'd let ourselves admit. It was a Thursday when I saw him again, the man with the orange jacket. I had stopped expecting to see him, not because I didn't want to, but because the rhythm of these mornings, the same stop, the same seat, the same quiet had started to feel complete. There was something soothing about not needing to predict anything. The bus had become my familiar space, and everyone who occupied it was part of that steady current. But there he was, the same backpack, the same headphones, the same obliviousness to the world around him, except this time he sat 2 seats behind me. Maybe because the weather had shifted, maybe because there was no room left at the front, but either way, he was there. And I felt that small shift again, that reminder of how one person's presence could slightly move the energy of a place, even if nothing was spoken. He sat, he fidgeted, and the air around him seemed to grow a little louder, even if the bus stayed silent. But that wasn't the shift I noticed. What mattered was how I felt about it. Normally, I would have felt the need to adjust, to make space, to accommodate this small disruption. But this morning, I didn't. I just let him be there. And for the first time, I noticed how comfortable it felt. The absence of discomfort, the quiet acceptance that sometimes the smallest shifts are the ones that teach us to let things be. I turned to look out the window, and for the first time in weeks, I felt no need to fill the space. Not with words, not with expectations. The road passed as it always did, the familiar storefronts, the same crosswalk. But the difference this time was simple. I didn't need to claim any of it. It was already mine, and that was enough. When my stop came, I stood, grabbed my bag, and as I stepped off the bus, I turned back to see the man still sitting there. He hadn't looked up. He hadn't moved. But that was okay. He didn't need to. I hadn't expected anything from him. And maybe that was the point. Maybe the key to all this. To these small, quiet mornings. To these passengers I didn't know. And these benches I kept returning to. Was the ability to just let it all pass, without needing to define it. The moment itself was already enough. I walked to work, my steps lighter than usual, and for the first time, I didn't think about the bus, or the bench, or the people on it. I just thought about how grateful I was for everything that was already there, without me trying to make it mine. Without me trying to hold it, because sometimes you don't need to take anything to make it yours. Sometimes it's enough just to let it sit beside you as it is. The seventh row was empty. The whole front half of the bus, in fact, felt unusually sparse that morning. I didn't think much of it at first. Just assumed I'd caught an earlier bus, or that the rhythm of the city had shifted slightly the way it sometimes does when you least expect it. But then I noticed something else. She wasn't there. Not across from me. Not further back. Not at the stop. No canvas bag. No book. No coat brushing against the aisle seat. Just the seat across from mine, vacant, staring back at me like a question I no longer needed to answer. And yet, it didn't feel like absence. It didn't hurt. It didn't unsettle me. It just was. I looked at that seat for a moment at the curve of its back, the faint smudge of a fingerprint on the window beside it, and I smiled, not because she was gone, but because she had been there. That was enough. I turned my eyes to the passing street, the bakery, the woman with the French newspaper, the boy with the oversized backpack, all still there, still moving, still part of this quiet, unfolding life. The man in the orange jacket was gone too, but I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel like anything was lost, because what I had gained from those days, from the repetition, from the silence, from the barely shared glances, was something I now carried with me, not something I left on a seat. I reached into my coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a note I had written the night before. Not to her, not to anyone, just to the moment. It read, "Sometimes the people who say nothing leave the deepest imprint. If you're reading this, thank you for showing up, even if you never knew you did." I didn't place it on her seat. That felt too much like forcing something to stay. Instead, I tucked it behind the metal panel just beneath the window, the spot where transfers sometimes get lodged and forgotten. Somewhere small, quiet, meant only for whoever found it by accident. The rest of the ride passed without incident. No conversations, no glances. Just the gentle hum of the bus and the sound of rain starting again on the roof. I didn't check my phone, didn't count the stops. I just sat, completely at ease for the first time in what felt like years. And when I stood to leave, I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because nothing was missing. The bench was still there, the city still turning, the quiet still intact, and me still whole. I took a different seat that morning, not because mine was taken, not because anything had gone wrong. The third row left side was empty just as it had always been. But as I stepped onto the bus, something in me felt still enough, certain enough, to choose differently. I moved back 3 rows and sat on the right side, window seat. The world outside looked the same bakery, same gray sky, same rhythm, but from this new angle, everything felt slightly softened, like seeing something familiar after finally understanding why it mattered. The seat was firmer. The window had a hairline crack in the corner that curved like a smile, and the light hit differently, not warmer, not better, just new. I didn't look for her, not out the window, not across the aisle, not in the reflection, and not because I didn't care, but because I no longer needed her to be there in order to feel what she had helped me remember, that even quiet can be shared, even silence can say, "I see you, She had become part of my morning, yes. But more than that, she had reminded me how to be in my morning fully, simply, and without apology. I had once filled that bus ride with worry, with noise, with silent hoping. But now I simply rode. I watched, I breathed, I was. The driver called out stops in the same rhythm. People got on, got off. No one looked at me. No one had to. The quiet inside me was enough. As we approached my usual stop, I didn't stand immediately. I let the brakes ease the weight of the bus. I let the moment stretch just long enough to feel it. And before I rose, I whispered something not to her, not to the seat, not even to myself, but to the air. Thank you for holding me until I remembered I could hold myself. Then I stepped off, walked into a morning that no longer needed routine to feel safe. The sidewalk was wet, the clouds were low, and still, everything felt wide open. I didn't rush. I didn't check the time. I just walked. Because I wasn't trying to arrive anywhere new. I already had.